Have you ever seen a meteor shower, where the sky lights up with streaks of light? Maybe you caught the Leonids or the Perseids at some point, but imagine being out in the Florida Keys in the late 1700s on a ship watching the heavens just explode with meteors, no city lights, no planes, no distractions, just you, the sea, and the sky. Hey folks, Bo Carter here, and welcome back to Old Florida Now. Today we're diving into that moment in Florida history when Andrew Ellicott, a man you might not know much about, made the very first recorded observation of a meteor shower in the U.S. Yep, right off the coast of the Florida Keys. It was November 12th, 1799, 225 years ago to the day, and Ellicott, while doing some survey work, looked up and saw, one of the most spectacular celestial events ever documented.
From Okeechobee ripples to the Gulf breeze, land of whispers, the Spanish moss in the trees, the swamps, oranges and pirate lores embrace Florida's history. We set the pace.
Now, Ellicott wasn't just some random guy. He was an astronomer and surveyor, a bit of a big deal back then. He was actually down here working on a boundary survey thanks to the Treaty of San Lorenzo. You might have heard of that treaty, also called Pinckney's Treaty. It set the border between Spanish Florida and the newly formed United States. This was a time when Florida was still a Spanish colony, so Ellicott was on the job to map out those borders. But here's where it gets interesting. While anchored off the coast of the Florida Keys, this guy looks up and sees the sky just erupt. In his journal, he writes about it like it was straight out of a fireworks show. He described skyrockets flying in every direction. I mean, can you imagine how wild that must have been? No street lights, no noise pollution, just absolute quiet, and then bam, meteors lighting up the whole sky. And he thought some of them might even hit the ship. So this wasn't just any old meteor shower, though. What Ellicott witnessed was the Leonid meteor shower. Now, if you're not familiar with it, the Leonids happen every year in November, but about every 33 years they get, how should I put this, extra wild, because that's when Earth passes through the debris left by the comet Tempel-Tuttle. And in 1799, the Leonids were putting on one of their famous shows. Ellicott was one of the lucky few to witness it firsthand and record it. Here's where Florida comes into play again. Ellicott was here because, Florida was part of the boundary disputes between Spain and the United States. The treaty tasked him with surveying the boundary along the 31st parallel, which runs just north of what we think of as Florida today. So while he was mapping the border, Ellicott took a break and became one of the first Americans to document a meteor shower right there in the Florida Keys. It's not just history, it's celestial history. Now, why is this such a big deal? Well, this was the first official documentation of a meteor shower in the United States. Before Ellicott, nobody had really written anything about it in the U.S. It was like discovering something completely new. And although we take meteor showers for granted now, back then they were kind of a mystery. People didn't understand the science behind them, and they were often seen as omens or signs from above. Signs from Ellicott's work was also really important for another reason. His observation of the Leonids helped spark interest in the study of meteors. Now flash forward to 1833. Another great Leonid storm happens. But by then, thanks to Ellicott's earlier account, people were more prepared and aware that this was a natural event. That 1833 storm, by the way, was so intense that some accounts say people thought the world was ending. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's stick to 1799 for now. What's cool about this whole thing is that Ellicott was already making a name for himself as a surveyor and astronomer. He was known for helping to define the borders of several states and territories in the early U.S. He was even a mentor to a little-known guy named Meriwether Lewis, as in Lewis and Clark. Ellicott taught Lewis the basics of navigation and surveying before he headed off on the famous expedition west. So in a way, Florida has this unexpected connection to one of the most iconic journeys in American history through Ellicott. But back to Florida, imagine what it must have been like back then, being anchored off the coast of the Keys. You know, the Keys themselves are like this mystical place even now, but in the late 1700s, they were even more remote. No hotels, no tourists, no key lime pie, just the natural beauty of the islands and the ocean. Ellicott wasn't just seeing a meteor shower, he was seeing the Florida Keys in their most untouched state, and he was doing it while working on a project that would help define our country's borders. This story makes me think about the way we look at things today. Ellicott was probably just doing what most of us forget to do, taking a minute to actually see the world around him. In a place like the Florida Keys, it's easy to get lost in the beauty, but how often do we stop and look up? How often do we take stock of what's right in front of us? Sometimes in the hustle and bustle, we forget that there's a whole sky up there doing its thing with or without us paying attention. And this kind of story is just, it's more than just Florida history. It's about finding those moments of awe in our everyday lives. Like when you're sitting on your front porch, the sun's setting, you've got a cold drink in hand, and you're just content. That's something I think we lose sometimes in all the rush. Ellicott didn't have to deal with Instagram notifications or emails buzzing in his pocket. He just had the stars and the sound of the ocean in that moment. So yeah, here's what I think. We all need more of those Ellicott moments, not necessarily meteor showers, but just those times where we can step back, look at the bigger picture, and maybe even let ourselves feel a little small in the face of it all. Because when you live in a place like Florida, where nature's constantly reminding you who's really in charge, those moments can keep you grounded. And hey, if Andrew Ellicott could find time to look up from his survey work and see the stars, maybe we can do the same. All right, folks, before we wrap up, I wanted to leave y'all with a few resources if you're curious to dig deeper into this whole Andrew Ellicott meteor shower story. It's not every day you stumble across a piece of history like this, so here's where you can learn more. First off, History.com has a great piece about Ellicott's observation. It covers his description of the Leonid meteor shower and how that moment became the first recorded meteor shower in the U.S. They really dive into the significance of the event. And if you're into astronomy or just love learning about quirky moments in history, it's worth checking out. Then there's the History blog, which offers a broader view of Ellicott's contributions to American history. He wasn't just about the stars. This guy was involved in some pretty key surveys, including helping to map out the U.S. Spanish boundary after the Treaty of San Lorenzo. They also clear up some confusion about Ellicott and his descendants, which is a neat tidbit of genealogical history, if that's your thing. If you're really into the science of meteor showers, places like EarthSky and StarDate are great resources to understand how events like the Leonids happen and why we still see them today. Those sites give you updates on when to watch for meteor showers, so you can try and catch your own Ellicott moment next time the Leonids roll around. So yeah, I'll link to all these resources in the show notes. So there you have it, folks. A little slice of Florida history that you might not find in your average textbook. Andrew Ellicott, the Florida Keys, and the first recorded meteor shower in U.S. history. Next time someone mentions a meteor shower, you can drop a little Florida knowledge on them. You're welcome.